All right, today we are taking one of the most epic, most well-known stories in history and giving it a bit of a system update. We're talking, of course, about Noah's Ark, but we're going to look at it through the lens of our modern, super digital world. So let's just imagine for a second. What if this whole thing didn't go down in ancient scrolls, but on a social media feed? You know, it might have looked a little something like this. It's a fun way to think about it, but honestly, it gets right to the point, a huge warning and an even bigger project.
So, why the sudden need for a boat the size of a skyscraper? What was in that divine direct message that got the whole ball rolling? Well, the short version is, things on Earth had gotten pretty bad. Like really, really bad.
In our language today, you could totally call God's plan a global reset. The whole point wasn't just about punishment, it was more like wiping a computer's hard drive that's just full of viruses and corruption. Reboot the entire system for a completely fresh start.
But hey, let's go back to the original source code for a second. The book of Genesis spells it out pretty clearly. It says the earth was corrupt and, importantly, filled with violence. So this wasn't just some random system glitch. It was a very deliberate move to fix a massive systemic problem.
Now, this is where it gets super interesting. The solution, this giant ark, wasn't just any old boat. Oh no, it came with a very specific, divine blueprint. This was basically history's biggest do-it-yourself project, and the instructions, absolutely non-negotiable.
And just look at the scale of this thing. The specs were incredibly precise, 300 cubits long, 50 wide, 30 high. To put that in perspective for us, we're talking about a vessel longer than 1.5 football fields, wider than 4 school buses parked end to end, and as tall as a 4-story building. This thing was absolutely massive.
Let's just park on that length for a moment. 450 feet. Can you imagine the sheer engineering challenge of building something that big, especially with ancient tools? This was a project of monumental proportions, built on nothing but faith and a very, very specific set of instructions.
So the construction is somehow finished. The hardware is built. Now it's time to load up all the data that's meant to survive the global reset, and that meant putting together the ultimate guest list.
Now, on paper, this onboarding process sounds kind of simple, right? Step 1, get the list. Step 2, collect the animals. Step 3, get them on the boat. But can you even begin to imagine the logistical nightmare of that? We're talking about the most incredible, almost unbelievable challenge.
And with Noah, his family, and his incredible collection of animals all safely inside, the global reset officially kicks off. The door is sealed, the hatches are battened down, and the weather forecast is about to get intense.
And here's a common misconception. A lot of people think it was a 40-day storm, and that was it. But no, the rain fell for 40 days, sure, but the water kept rising for 150 days. All told, from the very first raindrop to finally setting foot on dry land again, the whole event took about 370 days. That's an entire year living inside this floating zoo. So, after a full year floating on what was essentially a global ocean, the water's finally gone. The reset is complete. But what happens then? What do you do when the entire world you once knew has been completely wiped clean?
You could almost call this moment the ultimate unboxing. The massive doors of the Ark creak open, and all of these creatures are released to go and repopulate the entire planet. It's literally the start of a brand new world, all seeded from the contents of this one incredible ship. And that leads us to the biggest, most important question of all. With this clean slate, this second chance, what are the new rules? What's the new operating system for humanity going forward? The answer, it turns out, wasn't a new set of commands, but a promise, a covenant. It was a guarantee that a flood like this, a destructive, world-ending reset, would never, ever happen again. And the symbol of that promise? The rainbow, a permanent sign of hope in the sky. Which really leaves us with this final thought. Whether you see it as history or as a powerful myth, the story of Noah's Ark is all about destruction and renewal, about crisis, and ultimately about hope. And it just makes you wonder, doesn't it, how these ancient stories keep getting reloaded, finding brand new meaning for every single generation.